Connected to this Four Noble Truths, there is one fundamental Buddhist philosophy, a basic Buddhist philosophy, a dominant one and very, very important and significant. And I have a presentation, separate presentation on that. Take a look. Hello learners, this lecture is all about Buddhism. And Buddhism falls under two sections of Indian history. The first is ancient Indian history, and the second is Indian heritage and culture. And this is a significant theme of both these sections. There are several aspects of Buddhism that are relevant for the civil services examination. And my plan here in this lecture is to move on aspect-wise, covering every and each aspect that is relevant for the civil services examination one by one. And on each aspect, there is a presentation. So there are several presentations as well, because there are several aspects. Why so many presentations? The objective is to make the subject more intelligible to you, and also to provide you a kind of handy, precise, and to the point study notes. I hope these presentations would be serving as a kind of digital handouts for you. First, I give you some basic points about Buddhism. Point number one is that Buddhism emerged as a heterodox sect. Now there is a term here, heterodox. That means what is not orthodox. Point two, this arose in the period that is known as post-Vedic age. And chronologically, this is 600 BC to 300 BC. And third point is, this arose as a kind of reaction, a religio-ideological reaction against the orthodoxy represented by Brahmanism. So these three basic points related to Buddhism give you the idea that Buddhism emerged as a heterodox sect in the post-Vedic age as an ideological religious reaction against Brahmanical Orthodoxy. Now I move on to the first aspect. Take a look. The first aspect is Buddha, Buddhist, Buddhism. Buddha represents the nucleus of Buddhism. This represents the nucleus of Buddhism. Buddhism revolves around the Buddha. Buddha means one who has attained enlightenment, or simply an enlightened one, an awakened one who has attained Bodhi, and Bodhi means wisdom. And in simple word, one who has attained salvation. So Buddha represents the supreme being, you can say, having supreme knowledge and a perfect being. And all those who follow the Buddha are Buddhist. So the Buddhist refer to the followers of Buddha. And thus the name Buddhism. So the nucleus is Buddha. Those who follow the Buddha known as Buddhist. And so the name of the religion or a faith that is Buddhism. This is a very simple aspect, but relevant, and this makes you understand why do we use the term Buddha sometimes. Sometimes we say Buddhist, sometimes we say Buddhism. What all they mean. Now I move on to next aspect. I have already said that the Buddha is the nucleus, and Buddha is the awakened one, the enlightened one who has supreme knowledge. And in Buddhist tradition, there are many Buddhas, and these many Buddhas constitute the next aspect, and that is here. Many Buddhas. The first one here is Samyaksam Buddha. And Samyaksam Buddha can be considered as the main form or the principal form or the popular form. When you refer to Buddha, you in general refer to Samyaksam Buddha. When you say Gautam Buddha, in fact, you want to say Gautam Buddha as Samyaksam Buddha. Samyaksam Buddha is, of course, since Buddha, so enlightened one, awakened one, a perfect being. At the same time, one who has supreme knowledge of the reality, and one who is a supreme teacher and guide for others. So, a Samyaksam Buddha plays a significant role in Buddhism. He teaches, he guides, he shows the path which leads to salvation, which leads to enlightenment. He creates guidelines for the others to become awakened or enlightened. And in the early Buddhist tradition, we find a mention of 28 Samyaksam Buddha. Among these 28, Gautam Buddha is the last one. This simply means the 28th one and the present Samyaksam Buddha. Here I have mentioned three names. First is Tanhankara. Tanhankara Buddha was the first Samyaksam Buddha. Second, Kasapa. Kasapa is the second last Samyaksam Buddha, that is before Gautam Buddha. And the third, Gautam or the Gautam Buddha, that is the last and the present Samyaksam Buddha. Now, if you consider Gautam Buddha, you will find he is just not an enlightened one, rather, he is a supreme teacher and guide. And the second one is future Buddha. Future Buddha refers to the Buddha that will emerge in future. And this is Maitreya. Now, one thing important here, that Maitreya, the future Buddha, would be emerging as a Samyaksam Buddha after Gautam Buddha. According to Buddhist tradition, there is only one Buddha at one point of time. The present Buddha is Gautam Buddha, the last in this list of 28. And according to Buddhist tradition, as I have said, there can't be two Buddhas at one point of time. And one more important point here, that when the teachings and the relics, relics, of the existing Buddha, and the existing Buddha is the Gautam Buddha, disappear, then will emerge the next Buddha, and the next Buddha would be Maitreya according to Buddhist tradition. So Maitreya finally would be emerging as a Samyaksam Buddha. He would be the next enlightened one plus supreme teacher and guide as Gautam Buddha. The third type of Buddha, what we find in Buddhist tradition, is Pratyek Buddha. Pratyek Buddha is also Buddha. So, enlightened one, awakened one. But Pratyek Buddha is not a supreme teacher and guide. He does not teach, he does not guide. He does not show the path that leads to salvation or enlightenment. Now, fourth one is Dhyani Buddha. See, one important information for you. There emerged several sects or schools of Buddhism in gradual manner. One among these was Mahayana. I will be throwing light on this later, but in the same lecture. In Mahayana Buddhism, there emerged a concept, and that is the concept of Dhyani Buddha. Still later, a sect of Buddhism emerged that is known as Vajrayana, that is Tantric Buddhism. In Vajrayana, the concept of Dhyani Buddha became more common and more popular. So, what I want to say here is that the concept of Dhyani Buddha emerged in Mahayana Buddhism and attained, you can say, a widespread acceptance and popularity in Vajrayana Buddhism. Dhyani Buddhas are 5 in number, and the names I have mentioned here. Amitabh to Vairochana. The concept is that there are some eternal Buddhas, self-born Buddhas, self-existing Buddhas, self-emanating Buddhas, and they are heavenly Buddhas, they are not earthly Buddhas. And Samyaksam Buddha or the future Buddha or the Pratyek Buddha, they represent earthly Buddha. For example, Gautam Buddha. Gautam Buddha, an earthly Buddha, born here. So, Dhyani Buddha concept is that there are Buddhas, they are eternal Buddhas or heavenly Buddhas or celestial Buddhas, self-born, self-existing, and self-emanating. And they are 5 in number. And these Dhyani Buddhas manifested themselves into Samyaksam Buddha. And this also means that the Dhyani Buddha concept was the concept that was a kind of a highly elevated concept and given a higher position in comparison with Samyaksam Buddha. And the last one is Adi Buddha. This concept emerged in Vajrayana Buddhism. This concept is all about one, not many, like here you find 5, here you find 28. So one great, the first Buddha, the primal Buddha, the primordial Buddha, and that exists from the very beginning, that is always there. And all the Dhyani Buddhas emerge out of it. This means Dhyani Buddhas emerge out of Adi Buddha. And in several texts, several kinds of description we find. In some texts, Vairochana is referred to as Adi Buddha, and Vairochana is here as well. This means Vairochana earlier, described as a Dhyani Buddha, later elevated to the position of Adi Buddha. In some other text, Vajradhara and Vajrasattva referred to as Adi Buddha. So now in a simple way, you can understand that the first, second, third, these three concepts of Buddha we find in the early Buddhism. There is a facet, there is an aspect in this lecture that is development of Buddhism. So under that aspect, you will be understanding it better when I use the term early and latter or middle. So in early Buddhism, these three concepts existed. Then in the middle phase of Buddhism, that is characterized by rise of Mahayana, we find the concept of Dhyani Buddha. And in the latter phase, when we find emergence of Vajrayana, we find the concept of Dhyani Buddha becoming more popular and a new concept that is Adi Buddha. So this is all about many Buddhas. But two points are important here. When we use the term Buddha in general, this refers to Samyak Buddha. 28 and one more would be there, that is Maitreya. That's why known as future Buddha. And the present Samyak Buddha is Gautam Buddha. And second point, that the term Buddha in general refers to Gautam Buddha because Gautam Buddha is the present Buddha. So suppose if you use the term Buddha, or I use the term Buddha, or anyone uses the term Buddha, so you or me or he or she is in general referring to Gautam Buddha. I say Buddha was born in Lumbini. This means I'm referring to Gautam Buddha. Though I'm not using the term Buddha, but this meaning is inherent because Gautam Buddha is the present Buddha. Now, I'm going to throw light on the subsequent aspect, and I'm moving towards the major events of the life of Gautam Buddha. So next aspect is the four signs. The four signs are connected to the life of Gautam Buddha. You know, or I think you might be knowing, that Gautam, also known as Siddhartha, belonged to a royal family. And he saw four things. One, an old man. Two, a sick man. Three, a corpse or a dead body. And four, a monk. These four things revolutionized his life, his vision. So Siddhartha or Gautam, seeing these four things, eventually left his royal life, became an ascetic, and began a quest for truth or enlightenment. And eventually, he became a Buddha. So, in simple word, we can say that these four signs, an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a monk, made Siddhartha or Gautama a Buddha finally. The first three signs, an old man, a sick man, and a corpse or a dead body, awakened Gautama or Siddhartha. I'm not using the term Buddha right now here. Awakened Gautama or Siddhartha to the reality of life. That life is painful, life is full of suffering. And the last sign, that is a monk, gave Gautama or Siddhartha hope. And the hope was that leading a life of a monk or ascetic, the truth of reality could be attained. So, this is all about the four signs in Buddhism or the four signs in Gautam Buddha's life. Now, the next aspect is the major events of Gautam Buddha's life. In this presentation, you find three columns. 1. Event. 2. The meaning, that is the meaning of that event. And 3. The symbol of that event. And there are 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are many events associated with Gautam Buddha's life. But these 7 are the major events worth knowing and relevant for the exam. These 3 columns are different in nature. The first column, event, mentions the event, like Avakranti is an event, Jati is an event, and so on. And the second column mentions the meaning of these events, like descent is the meaning of the event Avakranti. Birth is the meaning of the event Jati. And the third column mentions the symbols associated with these events. For example, Maya with an elephant. Maya was the mother of Gautama or Siddhartha. So Maya with an elephant, this simply means a figure of Maya, or of course, the name is not written. So you can say a woman figure with an elephant, both together, symbolizes the first event of Buddha's life, that is Avakranti, that is descent of Buddha. Similarly, Maya on lotus, the second one. So here a woman figure, since name is not mentioned there, so a woman figure on lotus. This symbolizes the event that is Jati, that is birth. These symbols found expression in art, particularly Buddhist art in ancient times. For example, if you find a woman figure with an elephant in any painting or in any sculptural art, this simply means this is depiction of an event of Buddha's life, and that is Avakranti. And this is applicable to all the symbols. Now I throw light on H one by one. So first one, Avakranti, refers to descent. Descent means coming of Buddha. Descent doesn't mean birth. This means coming of Buddha. And technically, this is the event when Buddha's mother conceived Buddha. And the symbol is Maya with an elephant. Second is Jati. This Jati is not caste. This Jati is an event that means birth of Buddha, and the symbol is Maya on lotus. Third is Mahabhiniskraman. The meaning is renunciation. This is the event of Buddha renouncing royal home. I've already said that seeing 4 things, Buddha became unquiet, disturbed, and he left royal home. That event is Mahabhiniskraman, that is renunciation, and the symbol is horse with a man holding an umbrella. Next event is Mara Vijaya. Here, Mara refers to an evil spirit. Maybe you are aware of a story that Gautama or Siddhartha finally reached Bodh Gaya and began a long penance meant for attainment of enlightenment. Mara, the evil spirit, according to Buddhist tradition, created hurdles, obstacles in penance of Gautama or Siddhartha. Finally, Siddhartha or Gautama won over Mara, overcame, you can say, this evil spirit. So this winning over Mara is Mara Vijaya. The meaning is victory over Mara. And the symbol is Buddha in Bhumi Aspars Mudra. Here again you find a term, Bhumi Aspars Mudra. Here mudra refers to hand gesture. This is a particular hand gesture of Buddha. Buddha is shown in different mudras like Abhay Mudra, Dhamma Chakra Mudra, Dhyani Mudra. One mudra is Bhumi Aspars Mudra. So this mudra is Buddha in the seated posture, and one hand of Buddha is extended towards the earth this way or touching the earth. The Buddhist tradition says that after victory over Mara, Buddha made the earth goddess the witness of this victory by touching the earth goddess. So, Bhumi Aspars Mudra is a mudra which symbolizes Mara Vijaya or victory over Mara. Fifth event is Sambodhi or Nirvana. I will be throwing more light on Nirvana or Sambodhi later, but meanwhile, this refers to enlightenment, what Buddha attained at Bodh Gaya. And you might be knowing, Buddha attained enlightenment at Bodh Gaya under a peepal tree. That peepal tree is known as Bodhi tree. Bodhi means wisdom. So Bodhi tree means wisdom tree, because this is a tree under which Gautama attained wisdom. So the symbol is Bodhi tree, that is a peepal tree. Next event is Dharma Chakra Parivartan. The English equivalent is turning of the wheel of life. This means giving a new direction to this wheel of life. All human beings the part of a wheel of life. And this wheel of life is what in fact? This is in fact a cycle of life and death. Buddha threw a new light on this. Buddha changed it. He presented the idea how to come out of this wheel. So the meaning is turning the wheel of law. And here, the Dhamma Chakra Parivartan. Chakra is wheel, Parivartan is change, Dharma is law. So turning or changing the wheel of life or the wheel of law. And this event is first sermon what Buddha delivered at Sarnath. And the symbol is wheel. You might be knowing that in Buddhist tradition, wheel is considered sacred. Why? Because wheel is a symbol of Buddha's first sermon. And the last one is Parinirvana or Mahaparinirvana. These two terms are the same. But one more term is here, that is number 5, Nirvana. So Nirvana, that is term number 5. And Parinirvana or Mahaparinirvana, the term number 7, representing two different events of Buddha's life. But I have seen many civil services aspirants considering nirvana and parinirvana or mahaparinirvana as the same. No, this is not same. Nirvana is sambodhi, or in simple term, enlightenment. Nirvana is not physical death, whereas parinirvana or mahaparinirvana is physical death. And Buddha attained nirvana at Bodh Gaya, and Buddha attained mahaparinirvana or parinirvana at Kushinagar, identified with modern Kasya in Uttar Pradesh. So these are the 7 events, and this represent death, and the symbol is stupa. Stupa is a sacred thing in Buddhism. You might be knowing it is worship, and it is symbol of Buddha's parinirvana or mahaparinirvana, that is Buddha's death. So these are the 7 major events of Buddha's life. All these terms are important for you. Any term may be a question in the preliminary exam, and all these put together could be used in writing certain answers on Buddhism. Now I'm moving towards the basic teachings of the Buddha. These basic teachings represent the basic philosophy or the basic ideas. And on these basic teachings or basic ideas or basic philosophy, there are several presentations. So next is Arya Sachan, that is 4 noble truths. This is the nucleus of Buddha's teaching. This is the nucleus of Buddhist philosophy. This is the nucleus of the ideas of Buddhism. 4 noble truths represent, in fact, 4 truths. First is sorrow. That is, life is full of sorrow. World is full of sorrow. Second is cause of sorrow. The factors which give rise to sorrow. Third is end of sorrow. That means the cessation of sorrow is possible. The sorrow, the suffering can be ended. And fourth is means to end sorrow. That is a path which leads to the cessation or the end of sorrow. So these 4 truths Buddha presented or revealed after getting enlightenment at Bodh Gaya. These 4 truths are known as 4 noble truths. And as I have said, that the entire Buddhist philosophy or the Buddhist idea are based on these 4 noble truths. So here, the first thing to understand that Buddha began his teaching, or Buddha's teaching began with the idea that this existence is painful. This creation, this universe, this world, this life, this is all full of sufferings and sorrow. And then Buddha moves on and says that there are certain factors behind this. And then he moves on further and says, but this pain, suffering, sorrow could be ended. The cessation of sorrow, suffering, or pain is possible. And then he moves further and says that he knows the path also. He knows the means also. Then he presented the means through which the cessation of the sorrow, the suffering, the pain is possible. Now, connected to this 4 noble truths, there is one fundamental Buddhist philosophy, a basic Buddhist philosophy, a dominant one and very, very important and significant. And I have a presentation, separate presentation on that. Take a look. and that is related to the Four Noble Truths. And this is Paticca Samuppada. The English equivalent is chain of dependent origination. I don't want to go very technical here because that would be becoming slightly irrelevant for the exam. But I just focus on what you need for the exam. So number one, this term, Paticca Samuppada, is relevant. So you should know this term. You should know this term is related to what religion? Answer is of course Buddhism. Second is, you should know the broad meaning of this. And broad meaning can be conceived in the light of this English term, chain of dependent origination. In this chain, there are 12 links shown here. So, chain of dependent origination, through this I'm explaining this concept. So, in the chain of dependent origination, that is Paticca Samuppada, there are 12 links. 1, ignorance, to 12, suffering. Here, one link is 8, that is craving. Craving is also desire. Craving oblique desire. The concept is that 1 gives rise to 2, 2 gives rise to 3, 3 gives rise to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and 11 to finally 12, that is suffering. Or if we move reverse way, so suffering is because of birth, birth is because of becoming, and so on. The root is ignorance. So suffering is dependent on birth. Birth is dependent on becoming. Becoming is dependent on attachment. Attachment is dependent on craving. And finally, that is dependent on ignorance. So ignorance is the first link and the root here. Now, in these 12 links, you should know 1, 8, and 12. Maybe you have read, Buddha says that the cause of suffering is desire. Take a look at the previous presentation. The cause of sorrow or the cause of suffering is desire or craving. But suffering can be ended. Third truth. And the fourth truth, means to end. They are all connected. And one logic is very clear, that since the sorrow, the suffering is because of desire, so its end would be possible only when the desire is ended or desire is destroyed. So, of course, the means to end sorrow would be the means to destroy desire. Now, I'm linking this to the next presentation. Now, take a look here. Ignorance finally leads to craving or desire. Desire is the cause of suffering. But in a broader sense, it is just not desire. The root is ignorance. Ignorance gives rise to imagination, self-consciousness. These things I'm not explaining because not relevant for your exam. Just 3 are relevant. So what you have to understand here is that chain of dependent origination simply means a chain of 12 links, and this explains these four noble truths in a philosophical way. So in this chain, 12 links are there. 3 links you should know, and accordingly. Ignorance is the root, and ignorance means here the ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. One being ignorant of these Four Noble Truths represents ignorance here. Ignorance finally creates ground for craving or desire. And desire finally creates ground for suffering or sorrow. So this way you should know and understand this. So what things are relevant here? One, you should know this term, that this is related to Buddhism and a fundamental philosophy. Second, this represents a chain of dependent origination. Third, in this chain there are 12 links, and among these 12, first and 8th and 12th you should know. And this broad idea is enough for the examination, both for the preliminary examination and the main examination. So when you will be writing on the teachings of Buddha or the Four Noble Truths or the Buddhist philosophy, this to be incorporated, and only the points I have explained are to be explained. Now one more thing here. On the basis of the knowledge of these 12 links in the chain, you can also understand that how end of suffering is possible. End of suffering is possible when birth is ended. That is, 12th can be ended on the basis of ending 11th, and 11th can be ended on the basis of ending 10th, and 10th can be ended on the basis of ending 9th, and so on, and finally we'll have to end ignorance. So these all represent the basic philosophy of the Four Noble Truths. There is sorrow, there is the cause of sorrow, sorrow can be ended, and there's means to end the sorrow. Now I move on to the next one, and next one is Eightfold Path. That is also known as middle path in Buddhism. Eightfold Path represent the fourth noble truth, that is, means to end sorrow. So means are what? Means are these 8 right things. And that's why it is known as Eightfold Path. So Eightfold Path represent 8 rights. These 8 rights are the 8 right or the ideal or the ethical or the moral things to be pursued. And the first one is right belief, and the last one is right meditation. According to Buddha, following these 8, one can end sorrow, or one can end suffering, pain. This simply means that the fourth noble truth, what I have already explained, means to end sorrow, refer to, in fact, the path, a specific path characterized by 8 rights. And this path leads to end or the cessation of sorrow. Now I move on to next aspect. This aspect is over, that is Eightfold Path. Next aspect is Nibbana or Nirvana. In fact, these philosophical aspects are linked. I will throw light on this link finally after explaining each aspect. Nibbana or Nirvana. Nibbana is a Pali Prakrit term. This is the final goal in Buddhism. In simple word, In simple sense, nirvana is salvation or moksha. But technically, nirvana in Buddhism is 1 to 5. Literally, this is blowing out or dying out or extinction. So, nirvana literally means extinction, dying out, blowing out. So, dying out of what? Blowing out of what? Extinction of what? This is dying out of desire. This is dying out of suffering. And nirvana represents a state, the state of supreme bliss, supreme happiness, supreme serenity, that is peace. And nirvana also represents the dying out of the forces of karma. Theory of karma is also an important aspect of Buddhist philosophy. I am going to throw light on this as well. So, karma refers to deeds. Deeds govern the universe and the life of people. In the state of nirvana, the forces of karma also die out. And one more thing important related to nirvana, that this can be attained anytime, anywhere, even in flesh, that is, when you are living. Very good example. Siddhartha or Gautama attained nirvana at Bodh Gaya. This is also known as Sambodhi. But it does not mean Siddhartha or Gautama died there. So he was in flesh when he attained this. So see these points 1 to 5. 1 to 5 constitute the technical meaning of nirvana. But in a simple way, you can understand nirvana is the ultimate, the highest goal in Buddhism, and that means salvation or moksha. Nirvana is a state, and in this state, one enjoys supreme bliss, happiness, and serenity. And in this state, all desires die out, all sufferings die out. Now I move on to next one. And next one is the nature of creation or universe. In Buddhism, creation or universe is temporal, ephemeral, transient, it's not permanent. Buddha says nothing is permanent in this creation or universe, everything is transient. Today is A, tomorrow in the place of A, there would be B. A day after tomorrow in the place of B, there would be C. So everything is in a flux. So universe is essentially a continuous flux, changing, and nothing is permanent. Even no permanent soul is also there. In some other streams of religion, creation or universe is considered permanent. For example, in Jaina philosophy, creation is permanent. It can never be destroyed. It was there, it is there, it will be there. But in Buddhism, this is just opposite. And there are 3 features of creation or universe according to Buddhism. 1, dukkha. That means the creation or universe is full of sorrow. Second, anicca. That is, universe or creation is transient, temporary. And third is anatta, soulless. This simply means Buddhism does not accept the idea of any permanent soul. Soul is also not permanent. It is also transient. So the universe is full of sorrow. Universe is transient and universe is solo. This is the core of the Buddhist idea on creation or universe. And a line here is, universe is in a continuous flux. Today A is there, tomorrow B would be there. A day after tomorrow C would be there. then D would be there, then E would be there. I'm cutting the previous one, that means nothing is permanent. This is continuous flux, it's changing. This is also a significant aspect of Buddhist philosophy. And now the next aspect is the theory of karma or kama in two different languages, Pali and Sanskrit. Just now I have said that in the state of nirvana, there is a dying out of forces of karmas. The theory of karma is a highly significant theory in several ancient religious streams. This is there in Hinduism, this is there in Jainism, this is there in Buddhism as well. Karma, in a very simple way, refers to action, deeds. This action can be good, this action can be bad. This action can be action by thought, action by speech, and this can be physical action also. And karma determines one's life. Karma governs the entire universe. The life what you find, or the status of life what you find, is because of the karma. So past karma determines the status today, in present. The present karma would be deciding the status in future. So this is theory of karma in Buddhism, and this theory is there in other religions as well. So 3 points are there: karma or kama, action, good or bad, action, mental, verbal, and physical, and all changes in universe are governed by karma. And the next aspect is theory of samsara. Samsara literally means wandering, hanging around, moving around. And samsara is cycle of life and death. And this cycle of life and death is a domain of sorrow and suffering. And there are 3 points mentioned here: literally wandering, cycle of life and death, domain of suffering. The concept of transmigration of soul and rebirth are connected to the theory of samsara. This theory is also not typical of Buddhism. This is there in Jainism also. This is there in Hinduism also. But the concept here is unique and quite different. I show this, or I explain this through a simple diagram. I have said samsara is wandering, is a cycle of life and death, and this cycle of life and death is the domain of suffering. So one who is in this cycle, or one who is in samsara, is in the domain of suffering. When we talk about nirvana, so that is a state out of samsara. So one who attains nirvana wins over samsara. One comes out of the cycle of life and death. Now the second thing, the transmigration of soul or the rebirth are connected to the concept here, but that concept is very typical here, very unique. Transmigration of soul refers to a passage of soul from one body to another. Take a look. I create a small circle. This small circle, suppose, represents soul. And I create this as structure. This as structure represents the body. After some time, this body ends, but the soul doesn't. Soul enters another body. Suppose this body. After some time, this body also decays because body is perishable. It ends. And the soul enters still another body. Suppose that body is this. This body perishes again, and the soul enters still another body. Suppose that body is this. This is passage of soul from one body to another. This is transmigration. This is the idea of transmigration of soul. What normally is there, like in Hinduism or in Jainism. But in the case of Buddhism, I have said this is unique. Buddhism does not accept any permanence of soul. According to Buddhism, soul is also not permanent. Nothing is permanent. So naturally, this kind of phenomenon won't be happening according to Buddhism. Then a question arises that Buddhism accepts samsara and transmigration of soul and the idea of rebirth on the one hand. On the other hand, it refutes the permanence of any soul. So, what transmigrates actually? Here you find the soul transmigrates from one body to another. And when there is no permanent soul, so how rebirth? How transmigration of soul? Here in this case, this stage shows the rebirth. This all stages show rebirth. And this also represents samsara, cycle of life and death, then life, death. So, according to Buddhism, nothing passes from one body to another. Just impact is there. This means a new life takes place as here, but nothing passes from one life to another like soul here. This is just the impact of the karma or the deeds or the action. This means, suppose this is a body. This body decays, perishes, ends. So the forces of karma plays a role in giving birth to another body. But nothing is passing from this body to another. Then this body also decays. Again karma plays a role. The karma of this plays a role in giving birth to this. Same figures I am drawing below also to make you understand. But see, here also there is no transfer of soul. Again, this body decays, and the karma of this plays a role in giving birth to still another. But here there is no passing of soul from one body to another because soul is also not permanent. And this can be explained through the analogy of a fire, through the example of candles or lamps. Suppose this is a candle, and this is flame. This candle gives rise to another candle. Now this flame can be used lighting the another one. In this case, the second candle represents a new life. But nothing passes from here to here. Again, using this candle, you can light still another candle. Suppose this is lighted. So this gives birth to this, but nothing passes from this candle to this candle. Lighting new candle is something like rise of new life like this. But nothing passes. Just impact is there. This is just a cause and effect phenomenon. So this is the best way to explain the concept of transmigration or rebirth in Buddhism linked with samsara. That is unique one. And here many thinkers, philosophers put a question mark that when nothing is passing from one to another, how this is rebirth? So the Buddhists explain this way. Now I move on to next aspect. And next aspect is three jewels. Three jewels also known as three ratna in Buddhism. The three gems. This concept of three jewels or three ratna emerged after death of Buddha. This was raised, you can say, by the followers of Buddha. Three jewels are number one, Buddha. Buddha means the enlightened one, the supreme guide and the supreme teacher. Two, Dhamma. Dhamma means Buddha's teachings or doctrine. The source of Dhamma is Buddha. And third is Sangha, that is monastic order. So first is the Buddha, second is Dhamma, third is Sangha. These three constitute three ratna or three gems or three jewels in Buddhism. This idea, as I have said, emerged after death of Buddha and gradually became popular and a very fundamental aspect of Buddhism. Now the consideration here is that every Buddhist must show faith in these three and must follow these three. Every Buddhist must surrender oneself to Buddha, to Dhamma, to Sangha. In no situation a Buddhist should violate or deviate from these three ideals. So they represent three ideals and considered important for attainment of enlightenment or nirvana. So three ratna became three great ideals to be followed by every Buddhist, considered essential for attainment of nirvana. So now I move on to next aspect. Take a look. Next aspect is the concept of metta. In Sanskrit, you can call it mitra. In fact, this concept represents universal love and friendliness. You can consider this as a great ethical value associated with Buddhism. And this value is universal love and friendliness. This simply means that a Buddhist is supposed to show absolute love and friendliness towards others. And it is considered that the metta creates the basis of a promotion of the happiness and the welfare of all the people all over the world. So these points here, 1, 2, 3, universal and all-embracing love, active benevolence, willingness to forego self-interest and promote welfare and happiness of mankind, represent the essence of the concept of metta. So it's a simple one. Now, the next aspect. And next aspect is Buddhist Sangiti. Sangiti refers to councils. Buddhist Sangiti, in English, Buddhist councils were essentially gathering or the meetings, you can say, of the Buddhist monks for a specific purposes. Those purposes were usually a compilation of holy text, deliberations over certain monastic rules and ideologies, and also settling the doctrinal issues that became debatable issues. So, in the history of Buddhism in ancient times, four councils were convened, or four councils took place. And here the description is the place of the council, for example, in the case of first. So, place is Rajagriha. Second is the chronology of the council, that is about 486 BC. Third is the reign of the king when the council took place. So that is King Ajatasattu of Magad. And next information here is the president. This means one who presided over. So he was Mahakasyap. And the last is what happened in this council. Sutta and Vinay Pitakas were compiled. Sutta and Vinay Pitakas constitute the holy text in Buddhism. I will be throwing light on this. This is a separate aspect. So this way information is given. So first Rajagriha, second Vaishali, third Patliputra, fourth Kundalwan. As regards some important development, so first is compilation of Sutta and Vinay Pitakas. Second is the first is split into Asthaviravadin and Mahasangikas, and I will be throwing light on this in the next aspect, that is various sects of Buddhism. And the next important is compilation of Abhidhamma Pitaka. So these three important things what happened during these Buddhist councils are important for you. So in the first council, the holy texts Sutta and Vinay Pitakas were compiled. In the second council at Vaishali, the first split took place. First split into Asthaviravadin and Mahasangikas. And in the third, Abhidhamma Pitaka was compiled. This was also a part of the holy text, and I will be throwing light on Sutta, Vinay, and Abhidhamma Pitaka later in the next aspect. So this is a straight way you can say certain specific information related to Buddhist Sangiti, and you can straight way use, and no further explanation is needed. Now I move on to next aspect, and next is Buddhist sects. See, a very unique feature of Buddhism is that it got split into many sects. See, a good number of sects I have mentioned here. This division or this split was essentially because of the doctrinal differences and the differences over the monastic rules. So one by one, many sects or many schools emerge in Buddhism, and this presentation depicts first two main schools or sects. First is Asthaviravadin, also known as Theravadin, and second is Mahasanghika. Rise of Theravadin or Mahasanghika represent the first split that took place in the second Buddhist council just now I have discussed. And out of Astharavadin or Theravadin, there emerge many sects eventually. And out of Mahasanghikas, there emerge four. These four. And the tradition of Mahasanghikas created ground for the rise of Mahayana eventually. And Mahayana, or out of Mahayana, emerge these two, Madhyamika and Yogacara, known as Vigyanvad also. And out of the tradition of Mahayana emerge Vajrayana. And these Tantrayan, Mantrayan, and Kalachakrayan, they are the various forms of Vajrayana. So, this explanation is very simple. First, there emerged two sects, Asthaviravadi, no Theravadi, and Mahasangika. This split took place in the second council. Then, out of Theravadi or Astharavadi, there emerged several sects. And out of Mahasangikas emerged these four. And this tradition, that is Mahasangika tradition, including these sects that emerged out of Mahasangika, created ground for rise of Mahayana. And Mahayana gave birth to Madhyamika and Yogacharya. You can consider Madhyamika and Yogacharya two philosophical schools of Mahayana. And out of Mahayana tradition, that includes Madhyamika Yogacharya, emerged Vajrayana, that was a Tantric Buddhism. And there emerged several forms of Vajrayana, such as Tantrayan, Mantrayan, Kalachakrayan. Now, what all facets are important for you? You are not supposed to know the characteristics of all these sects and their chronology and their history. The first thing that is relevant for your exam is you should know the names of these sects so that you can identify that these sects are associated with Buddhism. The second thing that is important for you is that with respect to certain sects, certain specific concepts are important, or there are certain specific concepts connected to some specific sects are important for you. And they are, I am writing here, first connected to Samathyas. This is a concept of Puddgal. This represents theory of Puddgal. Puddgal means person. That's all. You don't need explanation of the Puddgal. You need know that the concept of Puddgal is associated with what Buddhist sect? Simple. That is Samathyas. Second, here is related to Lokata. Here the concept is Lokotara Buddha. Lokotara Buddha refers to super mundane Buddha. Buddha having some supernatural powers, just not human. And third is related to Madhyamika, and that is the concept of Sunyata. The founder of Madhyamika school that emerged out of Mahayana was Nagarjuna, a very famous and great Buddhist scholar. And Sunyata is the concept presented by Nagarjuna, the founder of Madhyamika school. And Sunyata refers to that no permanent substance exists. So Puddgal refers to person, Lokotara Buddha refers to super mundane Buddha, and Sunyata refers to no permanent substance exists. So these are the three concepts you are supposed to know, relevant for you for the exam. This is what I have mentioned. Now the next thing important here is Mahayana. Mahayana school and its characteristic features. This is important. And this needs exclusive treatment. So I have a separate presentation on this. I will be throwing light in a few minutes. Now, still another important facet here is that in the light of these many sects, you have to understand the three main phases of the development of Buddhism. And I'm showing that. These three main phases are the early, the middle, and the latter. The development of this line, that is, rise of Astara-Viravadi, Theravadi, and emergence of so many other sects, this represent the early phase. That is the early phase of development of Buddhism. Rise of Mahayana and the connected schools, Madhyamika and Yogacara, this represent the middle phase. And the last, Vajrayana and associated, this represent latter phase. So there are three main or the great phases of development of Buddhism, that is from the beginning till 12th century C. Because after 12th century C, Buddhism lost relevance in India to a great extent. So this entire period, beginning that is 5th century BC to 12th century C, this entire period that represents the history of development of Buddhism is traditionally divided into three main phases. One, the early phase, two, the middle phase, and three, the latter phase. This early phase is known as Hinayana. The middle phase is known as Mahayana, and the latter phase is known as Vajrayana. And I have a separate presentation for you because three main phases of the development of Buddhism is a separate aspect related to Buddhism. So take a look. This presentation is all about the three main phases of development. Phase 1 is early phase, that is known as Hinayana. Phase 2 is middle phase, that is known as Mahayana. And phase 3 is latter phase, that is known as Vajrayana. If you consider the chronology here, so from the very beginning, so that is 5th century BC onwards. Second phase begins around 100 C. And the third phase begins around 700 C. And this ends 12th century C. So 5th century BC to 12th century C represent the history of Buddhism in India. And this entire period is traditionally divided into three main phases, and they are phase 1 early, phase 2 middle, phase 3 latter, known as Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And I have also shown here the a specific chronology of the specific phase. So early phase is 5th century BC to about 100 C. The middle phase is about 100 C to about 700 C. And the latter phase is about 700 C to 12th century C. Now here, the first phase, as I have said, is traditionally known as Hinayana. Second phase is traditionally known as Mahayana. Now here there is very interesting a fact all about Mahayana and Hinayana. And as I have just now shown you in the previous presentation here, the early phase is this. Here you don't find any name or any term Hinayana as such. Though in the middle phase you find Mahayana, and in the latter phase you find Vajrayana. So how come this name Hinayana? Does it mean that these all represent Hinayana? So there is interesting fact related to this, and this I am going to show you. Take a look. See, around 100 C, a group of Buddhists, they coined two words or two terms. One, Mahayana, two, Hinayana. This means before this there was no term Hinayana or Mahayana. They also coined two more terms on the basis of these two terms. Mahayanist, that means the follower of Mahayana, and Hinayanist, the follower of Hinayana. In fact, what did they want to say? This group wanted to say that their way or their vision of Buddhism was a greater vision, superior vision. And the vision and the way of all others simply means those who didn't follow them were inferior vision and lower way. So they call themselves representing Mahayana, the great vehicle, literally. The essence is the great way, the superior way. And they call the others representing Hinayana, that means lesser vehicle, literally. The essence is inferior or the lower way. So who all would be constituting here others? Take a look again at this presentation. So others means this. The Theravadins or Astharavadins and all those who emerge out of that. Others won't be including this group because this group created ground for the rise of Mahayana. So around 100 C, this happened. And then you find two new terms emerged, Mahayana and Hinayana. I would be saying that this was technically a split. Rather, it was a kind of move on the part of a group of Buddhists towards a new way or the new vision. And this was different from the way or the vision of these groups, what they call Hinayana. This means the followers of Mahayana coined the term Mahayana and Hinayana, and they call all these as Hinayana or a Hinayanist. But it does not mean they accepted that. It does not mean they accepted that they represented inferior or the lower vision and way. So this is very interesting a fact about the rise of Mahayana and Hinayana. Now, coming back to this presentation. So, phase 1, that is the early phase Hinayana, phase 2, middle phase Mahayana, and now you understand very well how these two terms emerged, and the last phase, that is Vajrayana. Now, if we consider characteristic features of the first phase and the second phase and the third phase, that will be making the things more intelligible to you. So, the first phase, you can say the early phase, representing Hinayana, was the phase characterized by the early Buddhist ideas. And these ideas had certain specific features, such as the concept of Arhat. I will be explaining this, such as the veneration of the stupa and the remains and the relics of Buddha and important Buddhist monks, such as a specific monastic practices which were considered important, and so on. Whereas Mahayana represented a different vision, such as Bodhisattva, I will be explaining this, such as every person has potential to attain salvation, whereas in Hinayana, this idea was missing, that everyone has potential to attain. Here, next important feature is deifying Buddha. Buddha was given a divine character and came to be worshipped. It began the practice of image worship in Buddhism, such as adoption of Sanskrit as a language. In Hinayana, you find the Pali as a language was used. So, if you consider these kind of characteristics, you can understand the differences between the first phase and the second phase. And this first and the second, Hinayana and Mahayana, I am going to discuss separately under the next aspect, showing you a new presentation, because this needs exclusive treatment. I have given you just a broad idea about this too. The phase 3, that is latter phase, Vajrayana. Vajrayana was a tantric school. You can say Buddhism characterized by Tantra Mantra. Vajrayana was yogic in character. Vajrayana was esoteric in character. Vajrayana was magical in character. And here a new ideal emerged. As you find, the ideal of Hinayana was Arhat. The ideal of Mahayana was Bodhisattva. I will explain these two. The ideal of Vajrayana was Siddha. And they focused on some specific kind of practices and rituals, and many of them were esoteric in character. And in Mahayana, there emerged the concept of Dhyani Buddha I have discussed. The concept of Dhyani Buddha became more important under Vajrayana, and there emerged one new concept, that is the concept of Adi Buddha. And Vajrayana also manifested into several streams like Tantrayana, Mantrayana, Kala Chakrayana. And Vajrayana became a dominant stream of Buddhism in the early medieval phase, that is around 700 C to 12th century C. And three main areas or three strongholds of Vajrayana were in this phase: Kashmir, Bihar, and Bengal. And in Bihar and Bengal, you might be knowing a ruling house, Palas. Palas emerged as a great patron of Buddhism, and under them, This tantric form of Buddhism progressed and flourished in Bihar and Bengal region. So this is all about the three phases. Now, among these three phases, first and second require separate treatment. Take a look. This presentation is all about Hinayana and Mahayana, and these points show the differences. First, you see, under Hinayana, the ideal is Arhat, whereas under Mahayana, ideal is Bodhisattva. How they are different? Who is an Arhat? Who is a Bodhisattva? Arhat literally means worthy one, perfected one who has attained enlightenment, one who has attained salvation, one who has come out of the cycle of samsara or life and death. And Bodhisattva is a great wisdom being, one who has acquired great wisdom, one who strives to acquire great ethical values known as paramitas or perfections. I'm going to show the list of this. One who is full of compassion, compassionate being, and one who is on the path of becoming Buddha. So they are all future Buddhas. And one more thing very, very important. They are all compassionate beings, and their motto is to help the whole world attain salvation. So in order to fulfill this goal, they refrain from entering nirvana or attaining salvation and coming out of the cycle of life and birth, and they want to engage themselves with the world, helping people to attain salvation. So in order to help people to attain salvation, they refrain from attaining salvation, because once they attain salvation, they will be in a different state and they will be out of the life cycle of life and death. So in this case, they won't be in a position to help others attain nirvana. Now, according to Mahayana, this ideal of Arhat is inferior, lower, and selfish. Because the ideal of Arhat simply means that one has to work for one's own salvation. Whereas the ideal of Bodhisattva means that one has to work for one's own salvation plus the salvation of all others. So this is a greater way, greater vision, superior vision. So in Mahayana, there is a consideration that this ideal is inferior ideal. This ideal is superior ideal. Second difference is in Hinayana, Buddha is considered a human being. Whereas in Mahayana, Buddha is considered a divine. Buddha was imparted a divine character. Buddha was deified. And I have already discussed, if you remember, that the Lokotara Buddha concept refers to the super mundane Buddha, Buddha with supernatural power, just not human. This kind of concept, what emerged out of Mahasanghika, created ground for rise of this concept under Mahayana. Next difference is third, veneration of stupa and relics, not essential but meritorious. So in Hinayana, there was a focus on the veneration of the various symbols. I have discussed various symbols representing Gautam Buddha's life's events. So those symbols were venerated. Stupa was an object of worship. So under Hinayana, stupa and the relics and the different symbols were venerated. And it was considered that this was a kind of meritorious work, but this was not considered essential. So I have mentioned here, not essential, but meritorious. Whereas in Mahayana, the worship of Buddha and Bodhisattva became a fashion. The great importance was attached to the worship of Buddha and Bodhisattva. Who is Buddha, I have discussed, and who is Bodhisattva, I have just now discussed. Both became the object of worship. And fourth one is absence of the idea of devotion, that is bhakti. Whereas here we find presence of the idea of devotion. Mahayana was marked by the idea of bhakti or devotion. And this devotion was towards whom? This devotion was towards Buddha and Bodhisattva. The result of the acceptance of bhakti or the idea of devotion was a beginning of the practice of image worship. So images of Buddha and Bodhisattva came to be worshipped. This is the point here, presence of idea of devotion and image worship. And last difference is Hinayana language was Pali. All Hinayana texts were written in Pali, whereas Mahayana adopted Sanskrit, and Mahayana text came to be written in Sanskrit. Result of this was new corpus of Sanskrit literature emerged, that was Mahayana Buddhist literature. So this is all about Hinayana and Mahayana, and here these two concepts are very, very important. One more information I want to give you about the word Arhat, that the word Arhat is just not related to Buddhism. This was in fashion during the period when Buddhism emerged, that is the post-Vedic age. Anyone who was considered worthy and perfected was known as Arhat. So who was worthy? Who was considered perfected? Simple. One who attained some great knowledge, one who attained omniscience, one who attained salvation, and so on. So this term you will find in Jainism as well. One interesting story is there. When Buddha, after getting enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, was going to Sarnath, on his way he met a person who asked him, "Who are you?" Buddha's reply was, "I am an Arhat." Now think, what did Buddha want to say saying "I am an Arhat"? He wanted to say that he was a worthy one, perfected one who had attained enlightenment. So this information also is important for you. Now I shift on to next presentation to give you some idea of Bodhisattva and Paramitas. So here this presentation is about the Bodhisattva. An individual who seeks enlightenment, an individual on the path to becoming a Buddha, so that is Buddha to be, a future Buddha. And full of compassion, one who has attained a number of paramitas, that is perfection. These paramitas are initially 6 in number, later extended to 10. They represent 10, you can say, great moral, ethical values. And I have a presentation for you. 10 paramitas. There are 10 perfections, like 1, dan, generosity; 2, sheel, good conduct; shanti, forbearance; virya, mental strength. This way, you have 10. So, Bodhisattva strives for attainment of all these paramitas. what represent 10 perfections. And see, these are all great things or great values like generosity, good conduct, forbearance, mental strength, meditation, wisdom. So this is all about paramitas. Coming back to this, the last point, an individual who has attained great wisdom, mark this, absent, but decides to refrain from taking the final step into nirvana. I've just now said. Why? Chooses to actively engage with the world for long in order to help others achieve nirvana. And so, the followers of Mahayana consider their vision, their way, their approach as greater and superior. So, this is all about bodhisattvas. And in Mahayana tradition, there were many bodhisattvas. Four are important, you should know the names. So, I have a presentation for you. This one, important bodhisattvas. Here, first is Maitreya. Maitreya is also future Buddha. But in Mahayana tradition, Maitreya is a bodhisattva also. Second is Avalokiteswar. Third is Manjusri. Fourth is Vajrapani. And here I have mentioned lotus bearer, sword and book bearer, thunderbolt bearer, because they carry these things in their hand. Avalokiteswar, the very famous bodhisattva and very popular in art. There's a very beautiful painting of Avalokiteswar in a particular body pose known as Tribhanga in Ajanta. And lotus bearer means holding lotus, so also known as Padma Pani. Second is Manjusri, sword and book bearer. In one hand, sword is there, in the second hand, he bears a book. And Vajrapani is a thunderbolt bearer. So these are the four names we should remember as regards important bodhisattvas, and bodhisattvas normally shown in Indian art in a princely look, in a beautiful princely garb, and they're not normally shown as ascetic or a monk. Now I move on to next. And next is canonical literature. Just now you have come to know that Sutta Pitakas and Vinaya Pitakas were compiled in the first Buddhist council, and Abhidhamma Pitakas were compiled in the third Buddhist council. Now you will understand this fact in a greater way. Take a look. Canonical literature here means, of course, Buddhist canonical. Canonical means a literature that defines the basic principles or basic tenets of religion. So, Buddhist canonical literature means the Buddhist literature that defines basic principles or tenets of Buddhism. And the Buddhist canonical literature is known as three Pitakas. Three means three, Pitak means literally basket. So three baskets, and three baskets simply means there are three forms you can say. One is Sutta Pitak, second is Vinaya Pitak, third is Abhidhamma Pitak. And this is what is presented here. So canonical literature, Buddhist, is known as three Pitak, and three Pitaks are in Pali, and this has three forms: Sut Pitak, Vinaya Pitak, and Abhidhamma Pitak. First and second, that is Sut and Vinaya, were compiled in the first Buddhist council, and the third Abhidhamma Pitak was compiled in the third Buddhist council. The subject of Sut Pitak is discourses of Buddha. Discourses of Buddha. The subject of Vinay Pitak is monastic rules. And the subject of Abhidham Pitak is philosophical interpretation, or you can say philosophy. And this philosophy represents philosophical interpretation of Vinay Pitak and Sut Pitak. So Sut Pitak represent the discourses of Buddha, Vinay Pitak represent the monastic rules, and Abhidham Pitak represent the philosophy, that is philosophical interpretation of Sut Pitak and Vinay Pitak. And each Pitak further divided into several books also known as Nikayas. Two important things for your exam I want to throw light on. Number one, you might have heard about Buddhist Pali text Jatakas. Jatakas is a part of Sutpitak. And the subject of Jatakas is the past or the previous lives of Buddha. And the second important thing you should know is that Theri Gatha. Theri Gatha is, you can say, a collection of poems. And that is also part of Sutpitak. So this is all about the canonical literature. And after this, I'm moving on to next, that is Buddhist art. This is the last presentation that needs explanation. After this also I have a few more presentations, and they are like you can say a digital compact notes for you. So take a look. Buddhist art. Buddhism inspired art. Buddhist themes became subject of various art. Buddhist themes inspired art in ancient times and even in medieval times. And we find Buddhist themes in several art forms. First is rock cut cave. A good number of rock cut caves were constructed in ancient times and early medieval times, like Ajanta, Udaygiri, Khandagiri, Ellora, Elephanta. There are some brilliant examples of rock cut caves. And many such rock cut caves were Buddhist. This means among the rock cut caves, there emerged Buddhist rock cut caves also in two forms. One form is Chaitya, and second form is Vihara. So rock cut caves representing Buddhist caves are in two forms, Chaitya, Vihara. Chaitya can be written as Chai as well. Chaitya represent Buddhist worship place, and Vihara represent the residence of Buddhist monks here, with respect to Buddhism. So, first form of Buddhist art, what we find is rock cut caves in two forms, Chaityas representing Buddhist worship place, but this worship place was a rock cut cave, and this worship place was characterized by a stupa. So in every Chaitya you will find a small miniature stupa is there inside, and that is the object of worship. So this whole rock cut cave becomes place of worship known as Chaitya. And the second form is a vihara, that is residence of monks, but here is residence of Buddhist monks. And some brilliant examples of Buddhist rock cut caves are Ajanta and Ellora. Second is stupa. Massive stupas were constructed in different periods of time, spanning over the period ancient to early medieval. And stupas symbolize many things in Buddhism, such as number one, stupas are object of worship. Buddhists worship stupas. Second, stupas symbolize Mahaparinirvana or Parinirvana of Buddha. Third, stupas symbolize repository of remains and the relics of Buddha and famous Buddhist monks. Because many stupas were built over the remains and the relics of Buddha, that is Gautam Buddha, and famous Buddhist monks. And fourth, stupas symbolize axis mundi, that means center of universe. So the place where the stupa or one stupa constructed traditionally in Buddhism is known as the center of universe, that is axis mundi. Here I am that. So stupas symbolize this also. And some brilliant example of stupas are stupa number 1, Sachi. Stupa number 2, 3, Sachi, because there are 3 stupas. Amravati stup, Bharut stup, Nagar Kund stup, and so on. Third is a structural temple. There emerged certain Buddhist temples as well, and they were structural temples. And a structural temple means the temple built on the lines of the structural buildings today. And the most brilliant example of the Buddhist structural temple is Mahabodhi temple. Mahabodhi temple at Bodh Gaya, the famous Buddhist site where Buddha attained enlightenment. And next is a sculpture. Buddhist themes found expression in a sculptural art also. In several schools of sculptural art, we find Buddhist themes predominate. And these themes are images of Buddha, images of Bodhisattva, images of Dhyani Buddhas, images of Adi Buddha, and relief depicting various events of Buddha's life. And for the brilliant example of sculptural art representing Buddhist themes are Gandhara, Mathura, Amravati, and Sarnath. The first 3 belong to the post-Mauryan phase, and the last belongs to the Guptas. They are commonly known as Gandhara school, Mathura school, Amravati school, Sarnath school. And they are full of images representing Buddhist themes. And last is painting. Buddhist themes got manifested in painting as well. And 2 brilliant examples are: 1, Ajanta murals, Ajanta murals, and second, Pala miniature. Murals refer to big format painting on walls and the ceilings. In some Ajanta caves, we find beautiful murals representing Buddhist themes. And miniature refers to a small format executed on palm leaf or paper. And under palas, there emerges, you can say, a new style of miniature, what is known as pala miniature. And here the themes are all Buddhist. So this is all about the Buddhist art. And under this, there are 5 art forms where we find manifestation of Buddhist themes. And after this, I have some presentations. They don't need explanation. They provide you a kind of organized, compact digital notes. Take a look. Next is great Buddhist scholars. 7 names are there, and their chronology is also mentioned, and their association or their work is mentioned, like Aswaghosh, first oblique second century C, wrote Buddha Charita, the famous text. Similarly, Nagarjun, second century C, founder of Madhyamika school, wrote Madhyamika Karika, famous text. The same person who presented the idea of Sunyata. Third is Asanga, associated with the Yogacara school, wrote the famous book Sutralankar. And then fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So straightway, you have to use this as a precise, compact digital notes, and this gives you the idea of the great Buddhist scholar. Similarly, the next one is great patterns of Buddhism, and here there is a mention of the name of kings and ruling houses. Here, number 8 and number 9 represent ruling houses, Maitrakas and Palas, and their region given, Vallavi, Gujarat, and Bihar and Bengal. And the rest represent rulers like Bimbisar, Ajatasattu, Pasendi, Ashoka, till Harsha. And who were they? This is mentioned this way. So they were the great patrons of Buddhism, and their patronage played a role in the spread and the sustenance of Buddhism. Next presentation is important Buddhist sites. There are 10. So here is the name of the site and the reason, like Lumbini, Nepal, the birthplace of Buddha, like Bodh Gaya, Bihar, the place where Buddha attained enlightenment, like Sarnath, Uttar Pradesh, the place where Buddha delivered his first sermon, like Kushinagar, Uttar Pradesh, the place where Buddha attained Mahaparinirvana or Parinirvana. So this way, they are 10. Next is, and the last is, terminology. You have come across a good number of terms, starting from the first aspect of Buddhism till the second last, this being the last. So many terms have occurred. All these terms are important for you. It may be Arhat, it may be Bodhisattva, it may be Pratyek Buddha, it may be Dhyani Buddha, and so on. These terms will help you write good answers because when you use these terms, they're kind of value addition. Plus, these terms are a straightway occur as question in the preliminary examination. And out of all these terms what you have come across, several have already occurred as question in preliminary exam straightway. So, all the terms what you have come across are important. Plus, apart from those terms, there are some more terms what you haven't come across because they were not a part of the discussion what I have made. So I have presented them separately because they also tend to be important. So here the approach is just you should know that this is associated with Buddhism and what the meaning of that. Like Patimoksha. Patimoksha is associated with Buddhism. And second point, it represents specific rules. So naturally, since rules are defined in Vinay Pitak, so it's a part of Vinay Pitak. Similarly, Uposta. This refers to fortnightly meeting for confession. Monks were to meet fortnightly to confess whether they violated any rule or not. So this way, there are 5. And I have just thrown light on Therigatha, a part of Sut Pitak. And why this is important, see, is a collection of poems by elder nuns in Khuddaka Nikaya, that is a book of Sutta Pitak. So Khuddaka Nikaya is a part of Sutta Pitak, and in Khuddaka Nikaya we find a collection of poems that is known as Therigatha, and these poems were composed by women. That's why the elder nuns. So these 5 are there, plus these. So total 11. 6 is here Vasa, Pavarna, Kathina, Pravajya, Upsampad. And last is Tathagat. This term normally you find in connection with Buddha. Gautam Buddha given an honorary title that is Tathagat. That simply means thus come, thus gone. So who was known as Tathagat? Answer is Buddha. So these are 11 terms associated with Buddhism, what you can straightway pick up and work on. So this is all about Buddhism. A lengthy lecture, but this length is subject to the requirement of the civil services exam. The standard of question is high. And if you just work on basic things, you won't be in a position to address any issue in the exam. So, if you need to work comprehensively, exactly in consonance with the demand of the civil services exam, the length will become this length. Good study.